Hello, kia ora, welcome everybody. Here we are. We are in another live session here with the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I am your host, Kirsty Salisbury, coming to you live through Facebook, through YouTube, coming live from Auckland in New Zealand. So Sunday morning here. Happy weekend to everybody, wherever you are based. I hope that you're having a great weekend and thank you for tuning in. Today, we are going to have some very interesting conversation. We've been talking all about regression, past lives, reincarnation, life after life, life after death, all of these beautiful, juicy topics over in our VIP group. And we're just going to follow up some of that with another conversation we've got today. This is a live session. It's a nice interactive one. So if you have questions, please feel free to pop them into your comments box, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. Pop them in there. We can make this quite an interactive session and we can answer some of your questions around these amazing topics. So today I have got Tonya Swan with me. And Tonya is a past life regression and life between lives therapist. She's an author and a teacher. She's written, if you're on the video version, this book, Heaven and Earth, How It All Works. And we're going to get to that because this book was just absolutely outstanding. I highly recommend it. Tonya has visited the other side many, many times, and she had a near-death experience at age 37. So Tonya shares about what it's like to visit the other side, what it's like to come back and forth, about our purpose of being here on Earth, and what the heaven world is like. As I mentioned, she's the author of this book, and she helps people to understand some of the bigger questions in life, like why are we here and what are we here to do? So Tonya Swan, a massive warm welcome to you. It is fantastic to have you here.
Thank you, Christy. It's so nice to be here. And thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, that's okay. I tell you, I have been really looking forward to this conversation. I feel like the more I delve into these topics, the more I want to delve in. There's so much information. And as we talk about past lives and life after death, lots of little subtopics open up. And I just find it fascinating. I feel like I could never learn enough. And so I'm really happy to have you here because I know that you specialize in this. And let us know your comments if you're listening in, people. We've got a few people coming in to say hello, so that's wonderful. Wherever you are, feel free to pop your comments in there. If you have questions, also pop them in there so that we can address those and make this live session really full of value, full of all the information that you want. So, Tonya, you're a past life regressionist. You've done amazing things. You've talked about going back and forth between earth and heaven many, many times. How did this all start? What led you to do what you do today?
Well, it started when I was baptized. There was a beautiful little church that was close to our home with a lovely minister who was one of those people that walked and talked with God. And you could just tell by being in his presence, it was so lovely. And when he asked me if I wanted to be baptized, I said yes. And so my mother and I were both being baptized on this day. And it was in a creek. It's kind of cold. And those of you have ever been in the winter or in the even the spring, which what this was, it's kind of cold. So we're going down. We've got our little gowns on, and you can see that we're walking down towards the water. And I can remember looking back and seeing everybody. They looked like they were little angels coming down with the trees, the dark trees in the background, and the sunlight shining on their gowns. And it was that spring, fresh feeling. And as we came down, and he did my mother, put her down and lifted her back up, and then he did me. And as he put me back under the water, I popped into some other place. And I didn't know where I was, but it was beautiful and peaceful and loving. And I was just wondering where I was. And there were these beings, they were standing all around me. And I didn't know who they were, but I could feel their love. And I just took that in for a minute. And then I started to think, where am I? And I jumped up and I got really startled because it was just unfamiliar. I didn't know what that was. And so after that, one of the beings that had been around me at that time, he kept coming to visit me. And I could sort of feel him, but I couldn't really see him. And I asked my sister, because she saw auras from birth, I thought maybe she would know what is this?
Mm.
And she didn't really know either. And there were some of the others that also came, but mostly this one kept really working with me and talking to me and just giving me a lot of love. And I began to trust from the feelings of love. And it asked me to hold the place between waking and sleeping. And I thought, well, can't hurt anything. I'll try that. And it didn't sound too hard. Well, it's actually very hard. It took me months because you get right on that point and you fall asleep, And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would do it
fine
both
line.
coming and going. When I wake up in the morning, I say to myself, don't move. Try to stay right there. And when I go to sleep, I just try to hold that place just right on that transition, just that little pinhead. And finally, I got
Mhm.
to where I could hold it. And once you get to where you can hold it, it just opens. And when it opened, I could see my teacher, the being that had been communicating with me. He was standing right next to me. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And he put his hand out to me. And I just put my hand in his hand, and he took me out of my body that way and up into the spirit world. And he would just teach me. I had a lot of questions, and he would teach me anything I wanted to know. So I would ask him about, why do people act the way they do? Why is Earth like this? Why do we have, you know, mean people? That was one of my questions because I was pretty young still. I didn't understand why people could be so grumpy and mean. And I
Yeah.
remember one person in particular, our neighbor, he was always so grumpy. And so I asked my teacher about him one day, what exactly is his problem? And he showed me all his lives. He just like would throw it into my mind in little vignettes, little videos. And I would see all the lifetimes that he'd had and how he had suffered so much. And because of his suffering, he had become very kind of shy of life. And the grumpiness was keeping everybody away from him because he didn't want to be hurt anymore. And so, with
Mhm.
that understanding, I began to be understanding of him and I made friends with him. And I used to just go visit and listen to him. So it began to teach me more and more about compassion. That was, I think, the main theme of all of my lessons was about compassion over and over. My teacher would show me a repeated visual of an iceberg. And the iceberg was to help me remember that when I looked at a person, what I was really seeing was the tip of the iceberg. And all
Mm.
that was underneath was everything they'd been before, through everything they'd been before, like the lives, the hurts in this life, all of their experiences is all below the surface where you can't normally just see it. And he would say to me, just have compassion for all that's underneath what you're seeing, and you'll have no trouble with what you're seeing on the top there. And that really worked with this man when I tried it, having compassion for everything I'd seen. And he just opened up and began to talk to me. So that
Mm.
was one of the main things. He also showed me my very first lesson was about how everything isn't physical. It's all energy. So he made a room. He could make a room, like snap his fingers and create a whole room for me for my lesson, and
Wow.
then snap his
So
fingers
cool.
or whatever he did. He didn't really snap them. He'd just think it and it would be
Yeah.
created. But he could just do that. And so he had made a room and he was showing me that everything was made out of atoms. And I didn't know what atoms were at that time. It was all light and energy, and it wasn't really physical. And so he like would take the table or whatever was in the room and show me that it was made out of these little tiny particles of light. And then he would make it all disappear and go into this black space and something new come in. And so he was kind of showing me how things were created. And when I came back from that particular lesson and I came back into my body, which he would bring me back into my body every day, we did this for 360 times. So every day about 3 o'clock, I would go into this place after school. I would lay down, put myself
Mm.
in that meditative space, grab that point, and then he would appear, take my hand, and we go up for a lesson. That very first lesson, though, when I came back from it, I remember thinking, you mean this stuff isn't real? And I'd like tap on the table. Are you kidding me? This is not solid. It looks solid to me, but he just showed me that this isn't solid. That everything here is really made of light particles. And then the other part of that lesson was really amazing. He showed me that everything was connected to everything else. So the air was connected to the table was connected to me, I was connected to the air and everything else that was in the whole room and the whole world, and we were all connected. We were all like one in this big energy soup. And
Mm,
things just came into being from that sort of dark matter space and became the physical, but then they could go back into it.
mm,
So
mm.
fascinating.
Blows my mind. It's amazing. I know, because we think of this, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because even when we think about our lives, if the concept of reincarnation is true, if we've had past lives, which I believe we have, and yet we're so focused in this lifetime,
Yes,
it's hard
and
to believe that there's actually other lifetimes that have happened, or potentially happening at the same time. So when we look at that table, it's the same thing. We look at that table, it's so real to us. It's really hard to understand that actually it might not be what it looks like, that this whole
yes,
world might not actually be how it's, how it seems on the outside, the physical world. So super interesting.
it
Now,
was
how old were you when this happened? You were
I
quite
was
young, weren't you?
11 years old.
11, when you
Yes.
got baptized and had this
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
It's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was that like for you then growing up? Because that's going to give quite a different slant on teenage years
It
and
made it very difficult to talk to anybody. I had to keep it to myself, except for my sister, because she was born seeing auras, and she kind of saw the world the way my teacher showed it to me,
mm,
in everyone's energy, and she could, like, see all of their past lives and all of their energy of what they've done in this life in their aura.
wow.
I always thought it must have been difficult for her to exist on this planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk
Yeah,
about
that's
past lives,
fascinating.
one of the most interesting places that I visited with my teacher was called the library. And I'm a total library nut. I adore books. And I grew up
Same.
in the Portland Library and Powell's books. It's just, I love books. So when he took me to the library, there were these things that you could sit down in front of. And mine was kind of like a video screen, like for a computer. And they're called life books. They can actually take the form of a book, and some people see it that way. But for me, I
Wow.
saw it more as a computer screen, and you can talk to it with your mind. And so, say I wanted to see about how I had been doing in my lives in regards to a certain subject, it would bring up all of those and show me how I have been doing in little vignettes, little tiny videos about that particular subject. It could also tell me the future. If I wanted to put in, like in this particular life, if I wanted to say, well, what if I did this? What would my life look like? It could give me some probable future. I could also go back to a time where I'd already lived and say, what if I had done this instead of that? And it would show me how my life would have played out.
Could you change that at all? Could you go back and go, "What if I'd done this," and then kept that?
Where I
Or
didn't
no?
have that awareness to do that. I do that in regression work nowadays.
Yeah.
Sometimes when someone's had a trauma, we do a rewrite. So we go back to the time where it was the crucial point where they made a decision that made it happen to be a bad or a difficult situation. There's no quote bad, but a difficult situation that was really affecting them in their current life. And we rewrote over the top. And we're only allowed to do that when it's okay, when they don't need anything more from that. Because
Mm,
sometimes the things that we've had happen are still things we're learning from, and we can't take those away.
mm,
But it
mm.
really changes how they feel.
Yeah, wow. It's so fascinating. I find past life regression very, very interesting. It's amazing how it showed different lifetimes, things can transfer across lifetimes. You're talking about, potentially
Absolutely.
traumas, and people even down to birthmarks or scar wounds or things like that. What's the most common sort of things that you experience in past life regressions?
People having lost people is huge. People being through war and a lot of trauma in past lives. I had one young man in particular that was very scarred from having been through a whole lot of war. And he came into me, his parents brought him in because a psychic sent him to see me because she had heard of my work. And so she sent him in. He'd been having night terrors, which means for 2 hours every night, he would wake
Oh,
up and scream. And he would seem to be going through a scene, and they thought it was a war because he repeated the same thing almost every night. It was almost
Oh,
like
wow.
he was reliving a movie script. And he would do it for about 2 hours, and the parents would be up trying to handle it. And he'd wake up in the morning, though, afterwards, and he wouldn't remember. The parents did.
Mm,
This was
mm,
it's terrible for them to watch their son go through
mm.
this. So they brought him in, and we put him under. I put him under, and we looked at 3 different wars that he was in. One was over in,
Wow.
like, Korea, and one of them was in Nazi Germany, and another one in Nazi Germany. He actually was in 2 different lives in Nazi Germany. And after he was able to see these lives and see what happened and do some rewriting, like at one point, one of his friends died in front of him, and it was very, very traumatic for him.
Mm,
And so I took him back to that place and I said, I want you to watch with your spiritual eyes. And he watched the man come up out of his body and how happy he was when he came into spirit. And he was able to feel his joy. And it totally transformed how he felt about the death. And after we finished the 3 sessions that we did, or the 2 sessions, I'm sorry, the 3 different wars scenes, and cleared that out, he was totally changed. He has no more night terrors. He's lost his anxiety. He lost his depression. He's cleared
mm.
his room out of all of the war stuff. He collected war things. They were all over his walls, his bed, his
Wow.
floors, everywhere. His mother said he's just
Yeah.
now, like in the last year, gotten rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the most interesting
Wow.
thing on that
That-
one was that I asked him, well, Wyatt, what do you want to do with your life now? And he said, oh, I want to go into the military. And I said, Wyatt, do you really think that's a good idea since you've had so much trauma from it before?
mm.
Do you think we should ask your guide about that and see if it's a good idea? And so I put him back under and he went and he asked his guide, and his guide was like, are you kidding me? No, this would not be your best path. Could you take something else? And so he said, I want to be a paramedic.
Oh,
So
wow.
So he really
Yeah.
changed a lot, and I'm really excited for him because he was really suffering a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And I hear stories of people who have amazing healing, like you've just talked about through regression.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder when you're talking about how he then wanted to go into the military, do you think that potentially that was because he I don't know, we see the same patterns showing up in our lives. We see the same situations, we attract the same types of people to same types of situations. And I believe part of that is to learn specific lessons. And
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone here, but I can be a little bit slow to learn my lessons. And so I think I've got it. And then I'm like, oh, how is this happening again? How am I in the same situation
Mhm.
again? So, I was thinking, oh, I wonder if that was trying to go back into the familiar, trying to get back into the
Of course it
military
was, of course it
to
was.
do that.
We
So
tend to do that. We tend to go into areas that are familiar for us. We like
mm,
certain parts of the world. We tend to go back there with people that we've been with before in our soul groups and our mission groups, and
mm,
to places and doing things that we love to do. Like, I've been in healing, like, forever, and I just am very familiar with it. It's very comfortable for me. And now that they graduated me during my LBL, I actually went into a graduation ceremony instead of having a regular life between life session when I went through my training. I actually went to a place where they graduated me to the next level, which was blue. I was green for a very long time, but into this level where I'll be working with teaching and communication and things like that. But they also put me in something that was uncomfortable for me. They want me to work on weather. And I've been playing with weather for a very
mm,
long time, but I thought that was a joke. I thought this was just fun. And I
yeah,
was, being careful not to be too much influencing weather because it has a divine plan, I'm sure. But they really wanted me to work on hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that. And I'm like, wow, this is new territory for me.
yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. We could have so many conversations with the amount
Yeah.
of weather. We had massive floods here last week. I was literally on a live call and there was thunder clapping. And by the time I got off the call, there were pictures all over the media of like cars driving through metre and a half waters. Australia has just been hounded with flooding recently. I know there's been hurricanes and all sorts of things happening right across the world. So
Yes.
I'm not going to get sidetracked with that, but I think, oh my goodness, there is so much at play. And, I think we're all asking questions around what is this with the weather right now? So
Yeah, we
really
are.
interesting.
And we
I
can make a
want to come.
difference. We can. I just want to say that one thing. We can make a difference
Okay.
by imagining the outcome we want and feeling it as if it already happened.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And is that part of bringing it back to that moment between
Bring it
sleep?
back
Is that where
to
we can?
harmony. You're actually bringing it into harmony because you can feel it. Like I was walking one of the times, like at the Newton Institute when I was there, they were having a drought. And I was walking, there were so many plants that were really, really unhappy. And the earth itself was unhappy and it wasn't in a state of harmony and it really needed rain. And so I felt myself walking through the rain and I would just walk around the property and feel, and it started to rain. And it rained
Yeah.
for a couple of days and the plants were so happy. So it's bringing harmony where there's not harmony.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? I'm
Yes.
just asking for blessings on things. And yeah, harmony is such the right word. Harmony, bringing some balance into our
Yes.
crazy world. I mean, there's so much going on right now. We've got a couple of questions that coming in, so I just want
Okay.
to address those.
All right.
One here, this one's from Scott. This one's talking about that moment, and this is a great question, Scott, that I was actually just about to ask myself, which is the techniques that you hold to be in that place between being awake and asleep. What would you
Okay.
recommend for others to accomplish this?
Okay. What I did is I would just, as I was going to sleep, I would just be very conscious of the process of going to sleep. And I would try to hold the place of the transition. There's a little place where you click over. And when you start to pay attention to it, you'll notice it. But first, when you click over, you're going to just do it and you're not going to be able to do anything. After you keep focusing there, though, it starts to give you some control. And after a while, with a lot of work, you can hold it and stay there at will. And when you do, it opens the other place. Now, one thing I'll tell you, though, my teacher told me, don't ever do this on your own. He told me to always
Oh.
ask for help. So, Scott, if you do this, just be sure that you ask your guides to come and help you. And he never told me why. I just always was obedient because he was always having my highest good. I knew that.
Mm, mm. Do you think there's a possibility that you could I've heard some interesting concepts about getting stuck somewhere or
I've heard that. I don't know.
yeah,
Because I
is it?
never had that experience. And when I'm working with my clients and I take them to the heaven worlds, I'm with them. Their guides are
Yeah.
with them. My guide is with them. So I haven't had that experience.
Okay, okay, yeah. I like to follow things that are really safe personally.
Me too.
Not saying that this isn't by any means, but yeah, I've actually tried to do exactly what you've talked about. I didn't know it was a thing. I often because I love that feeling. I love to nap, I love to sleep, and I love to just lie and it's like let go of all of the weight of everything, and it's just this
Mhm.
floaty lightness feeling. And as you're talking, I'm going, I'm wondering if that's I'm getting close to what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've
that's
got a
the
really
theta
good habit
state.
of falling asleep.
Yes, that's the theta state. It's just before you fall asleep is theta, and then you go into delta, and then alpha is the meditative state, which is before that. So as you're going to
Yeah.
sleep, you're going to go through alpha into theta. And when we're doing the life between life work, we try to get down into the theta. And the way you tell the difference, alpha, you're still aware of your outer environment. When you get into theta, you don't. You don't have an awareness of it anymore. You're only in that state of floating and being. And then when you go into delta, of course, sleep state, you're gone. You're on the other side.
Mm, mm. What do you think about dreams?
I don't have a lot of experience with dreams. I've had prophetic dreams and things like that, but I think a lot of it for me is I'm rewinding things that have happened in my life and kind of processing it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'm being warned or told something I need to do and it's important, so things come through. So for me, I think it's different. It's not always the same.
Mm, mm. I find dreams fascinating. I
Me
have a
too.
lot of dreams, a lot of them. My husband doesn't seem to have very many at all. So I
Mm.
find it, yeah, so interesting that we're so different in the amount that we dream or the amount that we remember what we dream.
Yes, I
So
think that's a big
super
part.
interesting. Yeah, and
remembering
I
it.
I always wonder what the messages are. You know, sometimes they're just silly things and I think, "Oh, there's no message in that," but sometimes the dreams feel really significant, and I often wonder where we go in our dreams and whether we're visiting past lifetimes or we're getting messages from a
Oh, if you're
spiritual team,
asking,
I
that's a
suppose.
different question. Dreaming to me is that kind of in between space, but once you get over on the other side, then I think we're going to the spirit world. In fact, I believe that we go and do things, like sometimes maybe helping others, maybe helping weather in my case, and
Yeah,
that we work in groups to do things like that. And with my family, which is kind of fun, I used to travel a lot. So I made this pact with my kids that we would meet over Beijing at the Healing Temple. It's Kuan Yin's temple, and that we would all meet there every night. And so whether you're on this side or that side, we all meet together every night.
oh, that's so cool.
And so my
That's
mother
so
who's
cool.
gone, my mother who's gone and my daughter who's gone on that side, then we can meet them.
And what's that like? Would you show it like, do you wake up and you remember having a dream with them there, or what
It's
does that feel
really
like
it's
for you?
really not about that. It's about having that feeling that we're all gonna be together when we close our eyes and go to the other side. And we'll say that to each other, or like text each other, "See you in the green pagoda." And my daughter will say the purple pagoda sometimes. But anyway, we'll say, "Well, we're meeting up." And it just gives us that feeling of being together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so nice. That's
Yeah.
so nice. What do you think about soul groups? You've mentioned them a couple of times in our conversation, but do you think
Mhm.
that we incarnate with the same groups over and over again? And talking about purpose and our mission, how does that all sort of connect?
Well, we have a purpose, usually more than one purpose. There's usually several goals that people have coming into embodiment. And I remember a visual for myself of seeing the souls, and I've kind of seen it when I'm working with people too, where they're coming into embodiment and they're so excited and they're going to be accomplishing whatever they're going to work on. And people think it's a lot about their job or things like that, but it doesn't usually take that form. It's usually more about, I want to learn more about love. I want to learn
Mm,
more about truth. I want to learn more about compassion. I want to care deeply for others and be more kind. It's more that kind of thing. And so it kind of switches up for people when they come in to do LBL work. They think they're coming in to learn about their purpose, like they're supposed to write this book or they're supposed to travel to Egypt and do this fantastic thing, which would may be part of their purpose. But in that is the purpose of learning all these other things.
mm,
So that's the answer to that one. As far as soul groups, that's interesting. There's big groups, like the groups that we're born in. They're huge
mm,
groups usually. The day that souls are born, there's usually a large group. And those groups then divide up into smaller groups and sometimes into smaller groups, like mission groups. Like they want to work on a certain subject. Like I work with a group that does healing, and we've worked to bring more healing techniques, new age healing techniques in this life. All of us are embodied as healers. And so we're doing that. And now I guess I'm moving into working with weather in the same way, because if you think of that, that's kind of healing. Weather work is trying to heal the planet more, get balance and harmony.
mm,
So the soul groups, they can come together for missions, but a lot of times there's a group that you're born with that you spend a lot of time with and that you re-embody with over and over. And we see this in the past life regressions, where people will go through lifetime after lifetime, and there'll be certain souls that they repeatedly come in with. And you can tell those when you meet them in life, you meet the person and you feel like you know them. You feel like you've known them forever. And those are the people that are in your group. And then there's those people that you've been with your whole life that you don't feel like you will ever know. No matter how you try, you just don't feel like you know them.
yeah.
Yeah. And those are the ones that are not in your group. And they may be in your life because you needed to learn something and they needed to learn something. And together you bring more by being together. It's lovely to
Wow.
be with your group though. Last lifetime, I went in with 2 people in my group, and that I didn't take much support, and it wasn't a good thing for me. It was a hard thing. If I'd had more support, I might have been more successful in what I was trying to do there. In this life, I brought forth a lot of my group. I waited for 200 years to re-embody so I could be with a large number of my soul group. And the support of that group has been fabulous.
Wow. Wow. 200 years is a long time, isn't it?
It is a long
It's a long
time.
time. Is that potentially because this sounds, I mean this in the best way, um, because you're waiting for the others to pass to be able to come back
For the
together?
cycles, yeah, for the cycles to come together
Yeah,
where we
that's a
can
good
all
word.
have an incarnation together. Yes.
Yeah. So then what happens if we reincarnate and our soul then goes into a new body to live another thing, we do another cycle. If you're working with a medium or somebody and you're trying to connect with past loved ones and they come through, does that mean that they haven't incarnated, or is it a percentage of them incarnates? Or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, part of us is always in the spirit world. What's down here is only a partial amount of our energy. It can be 30, 50, sometimes 70%. The more advanced the soul is, the easier it is for them to do earth. So they don't have to bring as much. And
Mm,
some souls actually kind of don't decide on bringing quite enough. And they have a difficult life because they don't have enough energy to do what they need to do with it.
oh, okay.
And some
Yeah.
of them actually even go insane if they don't have enough to handle Earth's energy. So it's important
Wow.
that we have that. But if you think of the soul as a larger than you, and you as like a wave of this ocean that the soul is, and you're the wave come down here for an experience. There could be another wave of you in another place, in another dimension, also having an experience. You could also be in another lifetime in another place on the planet or
Like
another
a
planet.
parallel life.
Yes, and people
Yeah.
do that. It's harder because it takes more energy and you're dividing yourself into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's
Wow.
important because somebody wants to really work on a certain thing or with these people and they want to work on a certain thing with these other people. And so they split themselves up to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. As random and as unusual as it sounds, it totally makes sense to me
Yeah.
that that could happen.
It's
Do
hard to
you
wrap your
think
mind around.
that oh, it's very hard. I mean, this whole topic, and that's what I was saying right at the beginning, is the more that I go into this, the more I'm just like, this is so
Yes.
complicated. And yet I
Yes.
feel like it's meant to be so simple, and that potentially when we pass through, like you're talking, when you pass
Mhm.
over into a heavenly
Mhm.
realm, it becomes so much more simple.
Oh,
So
yes, totally.
fascinating. So we might choose to bring less of our soul into this lifetime, a less percentage,
Mhm.
which might make life harder for us, but we would learn more lessons.
Not necessarily. It's really nice
Okay.
in heaven. So so you might wanna leave more energy there. You might wanna make it harder, but you're just kind of deciding, "Well, how much of my energy do I really need down there for this particular life?" And you're kind of looking at the life and going, "Well, I think this amount will work."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
kinda
like you
like
make a decision
budgeting energy, isn't
yeah,
it?
just like here. We
Yeah.
decide how much energy we think we can use to do a certain project. And sometimes we write on and sometimes we really underestimated what we needed.
Yeah, because I
Mm.
often look around and go, why do some people have seemingly straightforward, quite easy lives? I don't think any life is easy, but easier. And then
Mhm,
others are really hitting the wall and having thing after thing after thing, and maybe that's about
mhm,
learning that
mhm.
lesson, but, I often wonder how can there be so much discrepancy between the amount of lessons people have to learn in a lifetime?
Well,
But that would explain it, wouldn't it? The amount of energy.
but also you have to like think about it in terms of this is one life. So this is a page in your book. When you leave this life and you
Mm,
come up out of your body, you're going to go, "Oh, it's a page." When you're here, you think it's the whole book. It's
mm,
not. It's a page.
mm.
So looking at it from that perspective, there's so much more. There's all these other pages and it's a bigger whole. And you have an awareness of that. When you come up out of your body like that, you have an awareness and an understanding of how everything works. And coming into your body, it's really hard to have that because the mind itself can't contain it. I remember the frustration I had so many times as I came back to my body, having been in that wonderful world and knowing all these incredible things. And I was so determined I was going to bring it back with me, that somehow I was going to take this knowledge and keep it. And I would come back into
Yeah.
my body. And some days I would cry because I couldn't contain it. And just a
Yeah.
second ago, I was holding it
Yeah.
and it was gone.
I totally relate to that.
Yeah. But
From
people
having
also, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
Carry on.
People also, what they sign up for. So if you're looking at a life, say you had a really hard life the life before. Like I kind of made a hard life last time, even though it might not seem hard to other people, it was hard for me. And that's something you have to look at. I can remember my mother
Mm.
saying to me, "Well, you have an easy life." Well, not to me.
Yeah, it's
It
relevant,
depends
isn't
on
it?
you, your soul,
Yeah.
what capabilities are, what you signed up for, and how you are able to work with your life. Some people, it's just they do it much easier than other people do. Some of that's attainment. If you've done it a number of times, you get good at it. And so after you've been here on this planet many, many times, you know how to do many things because you retain a lot of that. And the newer souls come down, they don't plan to do as much because they can't.
Mm.
It would overwhelm them. But you also decide in your soul group and the people you're coming with what you're going to do. A lot of
Mm.
some of the older souls will kind of write a general plan. They don't have to write as many details. But you decide, I want to work on this, I want to work on that, we'll do this, we'll do that. You kind of have little meetings and decide how you can play different things to help each other and help maybe somebody who's really having a hard time needs support, how you can help them to really get what they want to get. And so you help
Mm.
each other. It's kind of like a
Mm.
play. If you think of it, you're thinking how you can support your team to produce a really good production that everybody learns something from and grows.
Yeah. I really like that. That
I
makes
do
sense
too.
as well. The
I do
play, the
too.
different roles, the
Yes.
different
And
things that we all
yeah.
do, and we do it together, but we've got our own separate
Yes.
purpose within the
It's so
play.
true. And
Mm.
sometimes we make assumptions like with my father, I made a huge assumption that he had left me at 6 because he didn't want to be in my life and I was somehow flawed or something and I hated him for a very long time. And then when I was
Mm.
pregnant, I thought, well, if I have a boy, I'm carrying that hatred and I'm going to give it to him because he's a male and I'm going to associate that. And I don't want to give that to my son. So I have to heal this. And I prayed for 2 years. I have to heal this. Please help me heal this. And I was sitting in a church service one day and I saw a video. And the video basically showed me in my mind's eye that my father had chosen this role for me. And the reason he chose it is because in my last life, I loved someone so much that I basically self imploded when they died. And I ended
Mm.
my life because of it. And
Oh,
I in order not to do that again, he came and played that role and left me so that I would not trust men and be so in love that deeply until I understood more later in my life. And I was able to do that.
wow.
But it saved me from making that mistake again, which I would have. And then I was
Yeah.
grateful to my father. And I've seen my father like 5 times in my life. He showed up on my doorstep. He lived in Oregon, which is quite a long ways from Montana where I was living. And 3 days later, he
Mm.
showed up on my doorstep because I forgave him. In that service, when I saw that video, I forgave him everything and I loved him. And so he
Mm.
showed up.
Isn't that amazing? I think we're so connected without
Oh,
even realizing it.
we're
For
so
him to show
connected.
up 3 days later,
Yeah, 3
that's
days
quite
later, and I
beautiful.
asked him, "Why did you come? You've hardly seen me in my entire life." And he said, "I just
Yeah.
had to. I don't know. I
Wow.
just had to." And I spent the day with him, and I just loved him, and he just loved me, and that's basically the last time I ever got to be with him.
Oh, wow. There must be healing in that. There's got to be
Oh,
healing,
it was so
and
healing. It was so healing.
oh,
Both of us.
that yeah,
So
that's
healing.
really beautiful, isn't it? And completely outside of you striving to fix that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I do think we're all connected. I do think when we get those little things that jump into our heads, even just to drop someone an email or connect with someone, when they pop into our mind, I do think we need to follow up on those little promptings. I do think we're all connected, and at some level, something's trying to tell us to touch base with someone or just check in really, and I think it makes a really big difference. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can we jump forward a couple of years? Your near-death
Absolutely.
experience, you had that at 37.
Mhm.
How did that impact? Because I'm very aware, normally when I do the interviews or when I chat with people, quite often the near-death experience is the piece that is really significant to the spiritual awakening, and that's sort of the thing that triggers everything else. Whereas you had already had this, I guess, a spiritual awakening at age 11, where you're in this place between asleep and awake. You're having these experiences where you're talking about literally visiting heaven, getting information which you forget, but working with your guide. How did your near-death experience take place, and how did that play into everything before that point?
Well, with the near-death experience, it was when I was older, of course, and my teacher had shown me when I was working with him a lot of little clips from my life, what it was going to be like, what was going to happen, and I didn't know anything after that. After about 36, there was just nothing. He didn't show me anything, and it had me worried. I thought, did I die or something? I was just
Yeah.
really kind of sort of scared of it in a sense. Like, how was I going to be done at that point? And so the time came where it was 36 and nothing happened. And I thought, okay, well, this is good. And then it went a little bit longer and I turned 37 and I had a car accident. And in the car accident, I had injured a nerve going to my heart. And I didn't know that I'd injured
Wow.
this nerve. And I was going on vacation right a few days after that. And I had my little daughter. She was about 9 months old. And she was a very, very lively little girl. So she was very noisy. And we had my father in law who could not stand children making noises. And so I had to
Oh,
keep her quiet. So the whole time we're
yeah.
on vacation, I'm bouncing her. And so I'm irritating that nerve more and more and damaging it. And I don't know this. And finally, at a certain point, I was supposed to get on a plane and go to Puerto Rico to visit a friend. I'm in St. Martin in the Caribbean. And I had a nanny that was in Puerto Rico, and I was supposed to go visit her. The night before I was supposed to go, my inner voice said, "Don't get on that plane." And I'm like, how am I going to tell this woman that I am not supposed to get on an airplane and come visit her when we've been planning
Mm.
that the whole time? And so I told her. I didn't know what to tell her. I just said, I'm sorry. I've just got a really bad feeling and I'm not going to go. And so that night, I had a heart attack. And if
Wow.
I'd have gotten on the plane and gone, oh, I would have been over there. And the planes also stopped running. So I
Wow.
would have had the heart attack over there without my
Yeah.
husband who saved me. So that night when I had the near death, I was laying in my bed and I felt this really bad pain. It was coming in my heart area and it was going down my left arm and to my little finger. And I know that means a heart attack because I know that from my medical training. So I was like, "Oh, this is a heart attack." Now, my husband's asleep, my daughter's asleep, and because she's also very active, I'm not wanting to wake anybody up. We're in the same room.
Mm.
So I'm trying to be very quiet and handle my heart attack by myself. Oh, anyway, I went to get capsicum, which I keep in my purse in case anybody has a heart attack around me, and I know it works for that. So I take the
Wow.
capsicum, and I'm waiting for
Yeah.
this thing to stop and to be okay, and so I can go back to sleep. I think I was a little not thinking well, but anyway, I didn't stop because it was a nerve problem. It was not a heart problem like the muscle problem, which is what the capsicum can help with. So I began to get more and more pain, and I began to not be able to breathe. And it got to the point that I couldn't take a breath in hardly. I was very, very shallow. And I didn't know what to do at that point. I couldn't talk. So I took a hold of the sheet on the bed where my husband was sleeping and I pulled the sheet. And he
Mm.
felt that and he woke up and I was able to sort of motion to him what was going on. And he started to work on me. Now he's a chiropractor and he's a very good healer. And he was able to do acupuncture points, adjust my spine, get the pressure off of the nerve, and everything else he could do. He has other techniques and he was able to save me.
Wow.
And for the next 3 days, of course, I felt like I had a rock inside my chest and I couldn't
Yeah,
move
sure.
much. But during that time when I had that, I was laying on the bed after, and I could see into heaven. It was like I could see these stairs, and it looked like it was just going up into the heaven worlds. And I kind of thought, well, I wonder if that's where I was supposed to be going. I don't know, but I could see the steps and I could see the angels, and I was like, "Oh, it's so beautiful." And so at a certain point, I was feeling better, and I got up and I went into the bathroom. And when I went into the bathroom, the light came down all around me. And I've had enough experience and had read enough and knew enough by then to know what this was about. And I'm like, I'm not ready to go anywhere. And I heard the voice say, your life is extended because of your children. And it showed me a feeling of my two last children, Claire and Joshua.
Wow. Yeah.
And it also showed me a clock. And it showed me at just about 50, not 51, which is where I needed to graduate, was to be at the 51 on that clock, a percentage of worked through the green level to make blue. And so I hadn't made it. And it stayed there long enough to let that really sink in, that I hadn't
Yeah.
quite done what I needed to do to pass to the next level, or I wanted to be very badly. And then it pulled up off of me. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, I'm not going yet.
Wow. That's amazing. Oh, and so you don't feel like you had a choice. You couldn't have chosen to go at that point?
They didn't really give me a choice. It was,
No.
I was kind of saying I don't want to go, but
Yeah.
it was more like I was saying, "Excuse me, I'm not leaving." So,
Yeah.
in my mind, it's not. I don't want to leave yet, and especially when I saw that clock, I'm like, "No, I don't want to go."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't go up the tube and them tell me, you can go back or anything like that. They did it right there in the bathroom. So it's like, okay, well, I'm staying here a little bit longer, and I was very glad to do that. But what that did to me was very, very uncomfortable. It put me in a state of in between the two worlds because it was an exit point. And it told me also that my life was extended, but not for how long. I later found out that was for 10 years.
Yeah.
And
No.
the place that it put me was where I could read people's thoughts. I could hear them thinking, and I could see into other places and things that were happening. And sometimes it wasn't very pleasant. People don't think very good thoughts a lot.
Yeah. Wow.
So for a long time, I had that, and eventually that faded out, and I was able to just be here in this world and have that kind of thing happen occasionally, which is okay. But to have it on all the time is really
Oh,
uncomfortable.
I don't think I'd enjoy that at
No.
all.
No,
No.
one time I
No.
woke up in the middle of the morning and I was like, there's a man, he has a gun, he's shooting people, he's in a subway. And I was seeing it live.
Oh.
I was somehow there. And I told my husband, and I said, I kept trying not to see it. And he says, don't try not to see it. Do what you're supposed to do. And so
Mm.
I was like, what's that? And he said, well, how about praying for them? And so I prayed for them.
Mm. Wow.
That was
Yeah,
happening at
that's
that time in New York in a subway.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that that would probably be taking place, and
Yeah,
it's
it was.
amazing the premonitions and things.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
no,
live.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone because I think that would get very heavy very quickly. I think
Mhm,
if
mhm.
you can't turn the dial, if you can't switch it off,
Yeah,
yeah, I can imagine. So, in one way, I feel quite happy for you that it did fade a little bit. You
yes,
mentioned that you learned that you had 10 extra years. How
yes.
did you know, like, how did you know it was 10 years? Where did you get that information from?
Well, I finally asked. I asked my guide, I just wanna know, how much more time do I have? And he did tell me. And then when I asked that, it was a little later than when I had the experience. So there was, I don't know, 9 months or something difference. And so I'm thinking
Mhm.
I have a certain amount of time, right? Well, it's getting close to the end of that time. And at that just about that time, my son comes into my room and he's crying and he won't stop crying. And I'm trying to get him to stop crying. I don't know what's wrong with him and he won't tell me. And so finally I closed my eyes and I just said, Spirit, God, you've got to tell me what is going on with him. And then I just knew that he knew something about my leaving. Sorry, that's a hard one. Anyway, so
There's a lot, yeah.
yeah. So I said to him, did somebody tell you something about me? And he said, and I said, does it
Mm.
have to do with my leaving? He says, and
Oh.
I said, did they tell you your mother was going to be leaving you soon?
How old is he at this point?
Oh, he's about 6
Oh, that's
or
a lot,
7.
yeah.
And so he's not, he might have been older. I'm terrible with ages and times. That's one thing we have to know about me.
That's all right.
I kind of live in this continuum, and so it's very hard for him. He was already playing the violin, so he must have been older. He must have been more like 10. So he's still young enough to be tuned in, but old enough to be playing his
Mm.
violin, although he started violin at 6. So anyway, he had this experience where he was having this knowing about what happened to me. And so, and questioning him, he began to talk to me and tell me that an angel had appeared to him in his room. And
Wow.
he had said he'd almost dropped his violin. It was so beautiful. It was a
Yeah.
big blue light and it was all around him. And it said to tell your mother that she's figuring out her time wrong.
Ah.
And then it also showed him a picture of himself falling out of a window and becoming crippled. And this had to
Oh.
do with something that he didn't know anything about. I only knew. So we both had pieces of each other's information. So he told me that, and I figured out that I was off on my timing because I had asked about the 10 years, but the 10 years started from when I had the experience, not from when I asked. And so I was almost
Ah,
out of time.
yeah. Right.
I thought I had like a year left and I didn't. And so I went into a crisis with that and started, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, my minister actually stepped in and helped and prayed for me. And I said prayers a lot. And my minister had been through this before and gotten an extension by the prayers that she did. And so she called to the angel of record to look through the record of my live stream for a dispensation for me to have an extension. And she told me to pay attention to what come into my life to do, what spirit was asking me to do to extend my life. And
Mm.
I kept getting this feeling that I should write a book. And I told her, I keep getting this feeling from my guide that I should write a book. And she said, well, what are you waiting for? They should have done it yesterday. And so I said, okay, spirit, I'll write the book if you let me stay longer. And she said, a time will come and you'll know, and that the time has passed if you get to stay. If you don't, you find yourself in spirit. So there was a day I was walking out of my office and I was walking backwards into the street. And my husband had pulled the car around to pick me up. And I heard him yell, step back. Sorry.
It's okay.
So I did. I stepped back immediately. And it's a good thing I did. Usually I would ask questions about everything because that's the kind of person I am. I would have turned around and said to him, why? I
Yeah.
didn't do that. I just was immediately obedient. And as I did, a car was speeding and it raced right past me and I could feel it. It was so close to me. It was probably a
Oh,
couple inches.
Tonya.
And so I wasn't hit. And when that happened, I felt these pages turn like a book. Flip, 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 flip really fast. And I knew I had passed that place and that my life was going to go on for a long time then. And a couple of days later, I got a call from my astrologer. And she goes, Tonya, has anything interesting happened to you recently? And I said,
Yeah.
actually, yes, Christine. And why are you asking me this question out of the blue when we don't have an appointment? She goes, well, you had this aspect in your chart that said you could have died. And I just wanted to see if anything happened because you're still here.
Wow.
And I told her, and I said, why didn't you tell me? She said, we're not allowed to, because then you might set it up thinking it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Isn't that
I think
interesting that she saw
that's
it?
amazing. I think if we know that there's a potential exit point or an opportunity, we would live our life very differently, wouldn't we?
Oh, I
Wondering
definitely
whether
was.
we take it. Yeah, exactly. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on exit points? So this concept that we have possibilities where we might die, but we
Oh, yes.
subconsciously choose whether we exit or not. What do you think about those?
Absolutely, we have those and we set them up. Some people only take one. I mean, say a
Mm.
child like I just worked with recently where the child was born and died in 24 hours. Obviously, I set up one exit point.
Oh, yeah,
But if were like me, I may have set up 3 or 4, or I may have only set up the 1 or 2, and the next one was a really an extension. So we can ask to stay longer, and if
yeah,
it's in accordance with our plan and the best and highest good for us and everyone concerned, we can do that. One thing my minister pointed out was that if I had this in my chart and in my karma or my decision about what we were going to do as a group, it was also in my children's, and that I should be
mm,
praying for that to be changed too. So I would
mm,
get in and pray, like I would do these prayers for hours a day trying to mitigate this,
mm,
and we did manage to do it.
mm.
So I'm still here.
Wow.
And what I promised was the book.
Yay.
The book is that's what I promised I would do. And I would get this out, that I would help people understand what the other side is like, what the afterlife is like, so that they're not scared of it.
Yeah, okay.
And
So
here
we've
I
got this
am.
book.
Yes, here I am
Yep, here
keeping
we
my
go.
promise. I'm
So
here with you.
this book is so interesting because I thought that I was sitting down to read a very heavy teaching book, which a lot of the books that I read are quite intensive, quite heavy. Um, I sat down and it was like reading a storybook. It was like a novel. It was this lady's life and different lifetimes and going through these lifetimes, and it was just so light and yet so incredibly full of teaching moments that I absolutely loved it. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of concepts, and we've touched on some of them today. I think my overarching question for you is, do you, now that you've written the book, do you sometimes question, well, does that mean that I'm going to die now? Like, is that the thing that I came to do?
No,
No.
I don't know when I'm leaving. I do know
Okay.
it's an accident. I've always known
Oh,
that.
okay.
And I'll be
Yeah.
gone before I even know what happened. So I can't
Oh,
interfere. The
right. Yep.
yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
because, I'd find some way to heal myself or some way to stay, and,
Yeah.
I do need to go home at some point, but I don't know when that is, and I'm okay with that, and I just feel like I did what I was asked to do, and I'll continue to do that until it's time to go, and I
Yeah.
am working on another book, which is answering some questions of one of the people that I worked with about her son who was macheted to death, and, her questions that she had
Oh,
about why, and he came through in a session and told us about that. And it made me think about all the people that have this kind of experience where something really tragic happens to them and they don't know why. And
mhm.
maybe I won't be able to answer everyone's questions, but I can at least help some people feel better like I did with her.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's gonna be so amazing. Yeah, that's amazing because I often wonder, can we leave too early? Can we leave before our mission is done?
Yeah, I
I
don't know the answer to that question.
yeah,
I know
when
there's
we
movies
think
about it and people have written about it, but I don't personally have any understanding of it, except that I know we have exit points, and I kind of doubt that we just go early. I just kind of doubt it. From the way that I've seen on
yeah.
the other side, it all seems pretty well planned, even though there's a lot of room for us to make decisions to take this exit point and not that one. There's a lot that we've decided we want to do, and we'll have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Isn't
Fascinating.
it?
Now,
Is it?
I know, and I'm sure we could talk for hours because I have a million questions, but I'm aware that this is a live Q&A session as well. So I'm just going to run through some of the questions that are coming in. If
Okay.
you have your questions, you're listening, feel free to pop them in there. We're just going to go through. Um, so we've talked about the techniques for being in between sleep. Um, Message here from, I assume it's Cairo and Adrian. Sometimes I wonder if transgender people are trying to tell us something else, something higher up that they don't yet understand. Now, I apologize to you because I can't remember at what point that question came and what we were talking about there. I'm not sure whether that jumps back for anything for you, Tonya.
Well,
Um,
I can go by what Dr. Newton says. I don't personally have a transgender person that I've regressed so that I could find out more information about this. But Dr. Newton says that he has had people that were homosexual and things like that. So maybe that can answer the transgender question fairly well. He said that they pick these lifetimes and doing these things to help to change how we think, to help us also to be able to be loving and accepting of others who are different than us. And so it's a test of love, a test of unconditional love. And so these beings, these people who volunteer to take on these roles, they're taking on a very difficult role because they have to put up with an awful lot to take on that
mm,
role. There's so much against them, so much negative energy. And so for them to take on this role, they must be wonderful souls to volunteer to help us to make this change. And in the heaven worlds, there is no gender like that. We take whatever role we need. And we are only down here about 60-40. So we aren't that much different.
mm. I hope that answers the question, and I think it comes back to just can't judge anyone's lifetime. We
No.
can't judge what people do, whether they're kind or not, because I think it all plays out on purpose and the way that we present
Yes.
ourselves. I think we've all got stuff and we're working through stuff both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad that Michael Newton's done some research into that. So I hope that that answers your question. We have another comment here again from Cara and Adrian saying, love that it's a page. So I loved that too when you're talking about your life being the page of a book.
Yes.
And I thought it was really interesting when you talked about when your husband said step back and you nearly got hit by the oncoming car, or you talked about the pages of the book fluttering through, and I thought
Yeah.
about this and I thought,
Yeah.
"Oh, I wonder if that was other lifetimes just all fluttering about," and that's what it was gonna take to actually get a physical book happening
I
was
hadn't
something
thought
to do
about
with that.
that. That's
So,
good.
interesting. Also, the page Akashic Records is something that I find fascinating. The book of life is what it can also be called, is everything that has ever been, is ever currently is, or will be. And so when you talk about this lifetime being a page within the giant book, have you got any insight into Akashic Records or anything like that?
Well, my understanding of the Akashic Record is it's kind of like the life book of the planet. So it's like the whole history of what this planet has been through, like if it could look as a being at its own book. So
Mm,
everything that we've all done on it because we were part of that. And so everything is here in the Akashic
mm,
Record. So that's
mm,
fascinating to me. I can't say that I could locate it as from when I've had the experiences that I've had, that I could say, yes, I remember seeing that, or I felt that, or I was told about that. But I have just surmised that that's what that is it's just the huge record of everybody and everything that's been on Earth and Earth's history.
yeah, yeah. And books are so significant, aren't they? Because you talked about
Mhm.
being up in this
Mm.
place like a giant library, and I hear a lot about libraries and about books, and
Yes.
there seems to be this ongoing theme. I love books as well, absolutely love
Yes.
them. So this concept of the records, the pages, the lifetimes, the books, the libraries, so many people that I talk to have seen spiritual libraries. I was gonna say angelic, but they're more than that. They're
Yes.
out of this world libraries. So
And
just amazing.
it's so important that people are able to realize that they are so much more than just this page. And, say they're
Mm.
having what you would call an easy life. Okay. You don't know what their last life was.
Yeah, exactly, so we can't judge.
Right. So
Yeah,
this might be that they are taking a dessert life and they're just
yeah,
having an easier rest lifetime. That's okay, especially if they've just had a few that were really difficult. And then the ones that are taking difficult ones, maybe they just signed up for a few too many things. And that's what we usually find when we look in their life books or when we talk to the soul groups, is that they just really decided to do a lot in this lifetime. It's like maybe they took too many um, playtime lifetimes and decided that this time I'm really going to get down to business, or they really, really want to get a goal, really want to learn something. It's just fascinating for them, or they really want some experiences.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah, we just
soul
don't know, do
recently.
we?
It was amazing. I was working with a guy, and he was we had him, we regressed him into the womb. That's where we go to first in LBL. We go into the womb of the mother, and then we go from there to the past life, and from the past life into the spirit world. So he's in the womb, and I'm asking him, like I usually do, how are you feeling about going to Earth? And he said, I am so excited. I just can't wait to get there and have all these experiences and the challenges. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, that's the most
Yeah.
excited I've seen people excited, but he was the most excited I've ever seen anybody for coming in for
Wow.
the challenges. Because I
Yeah.
just can't wait to see how I solve these things.
Yeah.
Can you
Oh,
feel
that's
that?
so
I mean,
cool.
it's just
Yeah,
a whole
I
different,
can. I can
yeah.
feel it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
some of
and
them are
because
like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna have to be with her," talking about their mother or somebody that I'm not sure I wanna come into this life. That would be a few of
yeah,
them. Most of them are just kinda, "I'm fine. Yeah, it's good."
yeah. Oh, it's fascinating, and I can imagine that because I don't know that yeah, I feel like this life is quite challenging, that this world is quite challenging in terms of lifetimes and places. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on animals? Because I often, especially my cat, my gorgeous cat, I look at him and I go, "Oh, dude, you're just having a relaxing rest lifetime." Like, he's just lazy and he's beautiful and he's so loved. Do you think animals like, what's do we can we choose to come back as an animal? Is that a rest lifetime where we're not working? Is what are your thoughts on that?
I have a feeling from what I saw up there and what I can kind of remember, like I said, some of it they blotted out of my memory as I came into my body.
Yeah.
But from what I can remember, it doesn't seem like they're in our space all the time in the heaven worlds. It's like they're in their space and it's close to ours. It's kind of like a different soul group. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
how you have your group that you work with all the time and there's other groups around you. It's
Mhm.
kind of like they have their group and they come into our group. And when we're recreating, like in the heaven worlds, if you want to recreate something like I might want to recreate a place at the beach where I just came from Kona. Okay, so I might want to go back to Kona. So I could just snap my fingers and create that whole space for myself, invite my friends, and we could just have a blast there. We could also invite my friends that were, you know, the dolphin. We could invite the manta ray, you know, that kind of thing. So we could bring in those elements. And they can
Mm.
be the same ones, the ones that you had before.
Right,
I've
okay.
always been
Yeah.
curious about how animals, like with reincarnation, do they reincarnate? Because sometimes animals feel like they were an animal from before. You know what I mean? Have you ever had a cat and then got another
Yeah.
cat and then this one feels so much like that one?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
because I wonder, do they reincarnate back as an is does every time an animal has another life, is it another animal, or
yeah,
can we choose to be a cat? Can I be my cat next lifetime and have this cool,
yeah.
cruisy, sleepy life?
Now, I've never seen that, so I don't know, but I don't think so. That's my feeling on that. And Dr. Newton says absolutely not from his experiences in the spirit world.
Okay.
But I think anything's possible, and we don't know everything. I think
Yeah, oh,
there's many,
look, we
many
don't know
more things,
anything.
many, many more things, and who knows to say that we couldn't put our energy into the cat for a little while and just experience being a cat.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me think about that. That's a whole nother conversation right there. Now,
Yes.
I'd love to know what that's like.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to some comments and questions. Be sure to check out the newest edition of A Course in Miracles, created by the Circle of Atonement. It includes source information not included in prior editions, making it easier to read and understand. Oh, well, that's really good. That makes it slightly easier. I've got the Course in Miracles on my bookshelf right behind me. I did find that quite heavy is probably the word. It's an interesting read. It's amazing. But if
Mhm.
they've done one which is a little bit easier to read, that would be fabulous. Okay, just moving down here, we've got Tonya. Would you talk about grief and how your work influences this?
Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of people who have gone through a lot of loss recently, and it
Yeah, a
seems
lot.
like for me, my practice is moving towards working with people who have lost someone. It started out with just a few of them, and it's become more and more. Like recently, I worked with a woman who had twins. They were born and they were alive. There were some complications while they were in the womb. She had a feeling and she pushed the doctor to do some work to find out what was going on. It turned out they were in danger and they took them quickly. But evidently, the one twin wasn't fully recovered, even though they thought it was, and sent her home with them. It died in her arms at 24 hours. And
Oh,
she
that's
was, of course,
devastating.
devastated and has been crying every day for a year.
She will.
Absolutely. And so when I brought her in and we worked under in regression, she was able to talk to that soul, and she was able to talk to her guides, and she was able to get an understanding that this soul just planned to come for that long. And it was about her learning the experience of loss and how to deal with that. And for other people and other things for her that the guide would not elaborate on, but that there were other lessons in this for everyone. And so growing and learning together. So that was very good for her to have that experience, to be able to understand why it happened, and that it helped her to accept it and feel very much better. And I find that this
Mm.
is the kind of person that's coming to me a lot nowadays. And some people will come when they've lost somebody else and they want to try to contact them. And I've had another person that came because he wanted to die and be with the person that was dying
Mm. Mm.
and was ready to check out. And I didn't think that was the best idea, but I just put him under. And in my work, I'm not telling people what they need. They need to find it from their guides, from their counsel, from their higher self. And I just help them get that information. So as we put him under, the person that was passing over came in and talked to him and said, absolutely not. This is not your time. You have things to do. Get over it and get on with your life. And he's now decided he wasn't going to check out. He was going to continue. And he's gone through training to become a hypnotherapist and do the work that I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
So he's going
Wow,
to be
that's
working with
amazing.
me. And that's a Mr. Lawrence Lance. He'll be working with me doing this work. And I'm so excited to have him joining me.
Oh, that's fantastic, isn't it? Because the grief is everywhere, and
It is.
I
It is.
know I know a lot of people seek regressions and seek support from, I guess, the other side to
Yes.
help with healing and to help get insight. And you do hear of miraculous healings that take place. And
Absolutely. And a lot of times when people are coming in to see me, the people that want to meet with them will show up before they do.
yeah,
They'll come into the room, and then during the session, the person sitting in the chair and the person that's presenting from spirit will push on me to try to get me to make them aware that they're there. And I'll say, no,
oh,
I don't do that. They need to learn to tune into you themselves, because then they have that skill. They can continue this
yeah,
conversation after they leave this room. If I do it for them, they won't.
yeah,
So I try to help them to make that connection after they're under in whatever way works. Sometimes it's up in the spirit world. Sometimes it's still where they're just in the chair and they're in hypnosis. But they make that connection, and they learn how to communicate back and forth. And I help them with the process. And that's so healing. I had a girl who lost her brother, and she was in last week, and she was just so happy to just see her brother and to feel her brother and to be with him
mm,
and to be able to talk to him and to now know what that felt like and what she could do to facilitate that conversation again.
mm,
And now her
mm.
brother's not gone to her like he was.
Yeah, that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the difference.
He's just in Africa, and she has to be the only time to pick up the telephone.
Yeah. Oh, wow, it's amazing. I just feel like regression's so powerful.
It
I
is.
feel like hypnosis is so powerful. It's so healing, and I've heard so many experiences where the person's had a connection like that that has utterly transformed them, enabled them to go on and live really full, great lives. Okay, so another question here we have: if we're as spiritually aware as you all, do we accelerate our soul's graduation?
If we're a spirituality, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. Soul's graduation, it never ends.
Do you think we come here to learn to graduate?
Yes,
And is this
we do go through different levels. So I can answer it in that way. There are different levels. We're born as a soul and we go through certain things, some of which are just kind of like requirements at each level. And so we're learning about life, learning to love more, learning to be kinder, learning to have compassion, all of those things. But we also learn about truth and things like that. So as we go through those different learning cycles, we move up in spiritual awareness. And that's what we mean by a graduation. When you've reached an awareness to a certain level, you graduate to, you understand that level. And that doesn't mean you're above anybody else. It just means you read that book. Okay, so you got it.
mm,
You really
mm,
internalized it. You understand this at a deep spiritual level. And so it never ends. Some people I talk to, they don't want to come back to earth. They want to graduate or ascend. And I'm like, well, you're just going to do something else. You're going to continue to grow either here or there. And I want to come back here. I like this planet. But some people really, really don't. And they think that, they
yeah,
can ascend and never come back. That is true. You can decide not to come back to Earth. Earth is a very difficult planet. We have 4 bodies here: spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. On other planets, which we find a lot in regression work, you don't necessarily have all that. And life also has a lot of randomness here on this planet. So you
yeah,
have your plan, but there's also random acts. So you get to have a harder game, shall we say? Yeah.
yeah.
And so I hope I answered your question, Cairo and Adrian. Um, some people don't come back after they come down here even once because it's too hard of a planet and they go somewhere else. Some people keep coming, and some people dedicate themselves to being here until all of Earth has attained a higher consciousness.
Wow, that's
Those are the
amazing.
bodhisattvas. Kuan Yin is one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. They've said yes, so I think that helps.
Oh,
That's yes,
thank
that's
you.
helped and answered it. I find the whole graduation thing interesting because a question that I get over and over again and that we talk around is we do the cycle, we graduate, we go into another lifetime, we do the cycle, we graduate, and then we do another lifetime. There seems to be a reoccurring theme. What do you think we're graduating towards? Is there 10 levels and then you become at a point where you don't need to come back here? Because you just said that maybe you'd come here once and you choose never to come back here again. What are we graduating towards? What's the final goal? Or,
Well,
I hear that there isn't one, and I'm not convinced there is one either.
yeah, I'm not sure there is either. I think it's everything is continually growing and expanding. The whole
Mm,
universe, or God, you know, we think about like, say, the Old Testament God, what they talk about. I'm like, you kidding me? I don't think God was like that, first of all. But you look at the consciousness evolution as we think of God today, it's a lot different. And so we're evolving. The universe is evolving. And whatever is in it is evolving. And I think that's going
yeah.
to continue to go on. I don't see that we're going to have that end. Now, I do remember in my coming back one time, trying to bring something with me. I was only able to bring the part that when I'm in this body, I cannot understand the whole of how things really work. That isn't a cause and effect like we think.
Mm,
That's only here. So now just wrap your mind around that one thought. That's hard enough. For
yeah.
what I could have pulled in, I think that would have blown my brain. So you know, just that one was enough. So I think, we're gradually growing, and some people faster than others, some people slower, but it doesn't matter. We're all growing together, and it's fabulous to watch what's happening on this planet. My teacher told me we were here to be part of this time, and this is a time of spiritual revolution, and
Oh,
that it
yeah.
was so important to be here. And many, many souls wanted to be in embodiment at this time because of the awareness it's growing and changing to be much more of a spiritual understanding and awareness than what we've had before. If you look back at the Middle Ages or whatever, it was a little denser, and we have it much better. And it's
Yeah.
getting better and better.
Yeah, in some ways it's getting better and better. In some ways, I think our physical plane is getting, well,
Yes.
I don't know, because also it seems like there's a lot of, I've heard people talking about the concept of a mass exodus, that there's a mass spiritual exodus happening and people are dying either through illness or through war. So actually, we've had a couple of people raise this. So I'd love it if you could talk to
Okay.
this. I'm going to read out this question. There was also one asking, could you address what's happening in Russia at the moment? But this one is anyone spiritual talking about our climate crisis, the future of the planet,
I
the
get it.
mass extinctions that are happening, and how can we be reincarnated if the planet is uninhabitable? Which is a great
I get it.
question.
And it's a question that's dear to my heart, being an environmentalist and someone who loves everybody and everything on this planet and doesn't want harm to anything. That being said, it's not just my evolution. So there are beings that are on the planet, and they are not at the level that this person who's writing in is coming from, nor myself, nor you, Christy. They're coming from where they need to evolve. And so the planet is here for them to evolve. And people have agreed to evolve with them and go through what they're going through. And we do know that once they leave the planet, they are in the spirit realm and they are fine. They're not dead per se.
Mm,
But we are learning, and these beings that are going through this and taking part in these things are learning that this is not in the highest good, but this is how they're learning it. Now, those of us who know that, we learned this before. That's why we know it. We know things when we came
mm,
in that they are just learning. And so it's kind of like we're looking from college at a kindergartner and going, well, why can't you get this?
mm,
They can't because they can't. They're still in kindergarten. And
mm.
so because the planet is for the evolution of many different levels of souls and different kinds of souls, we have to observe things that we'd rather not have happening. I mean, I would love it if all of this would stop and we didn't have the war and the
Yeah.
climate crisis and things like that. Now, one thing I'd like to share with you, Ashley, is I did have something happen to me when I was in that in-between state, when I had my near-death experience. I saw some things happen. One of them was blocked out. Two of them I do know. One is that we're going to invent something, and it looked to me to be not a bacteria, though it seemed to act kind of like one. I think that it's a nanobot. And
A
we used
nanobot?
a nanobot. I think that's what it is. I couldn't tell what it was at the
Oh, I'm
time because
learning.
I was looking at it and trying to figure out what it was because I'd never seen it before. But they showed me in spirit that we were going to invent these things, and they would be able to be programmed to clean up our planet. And we would clean our planet up like you've never seen it.
Awesome.
Yes, and they could actually transmute things too. You could program them to take something in and change it into something else. Or you could have them gather it and take it somewhere. And they could move through the air or whatever, but they were programmable and controllable. And so with that, we were able to clean up. Another thing that they showed me was something I still don't understand. And the only reason I understand about the nanobots is that it's become, because this was years ago this happened, they have become known to me. So I think that might be what it is, but I'm not sure. The other thing was a tower, and the tower was in the shape, it kind of went like this. So going up to a point and kind of curving over. And it was so large that you could see it from space. And it was all metal, and it was correcting our planet for something. Now, I don't know what it was correcting. I just know that it will be in our future and it will help us make it better for the planet, for us living here.
Wow.
So those two things really give me hope.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Think about the internet. We didn't even have the internet a few years ago.
Oh, I know. I try and explain that to my daughter,
Yeah.
and it's like, how
Who
can she
knows?
possibly understand that the internet wasn't a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who knows what we will somehow come up with. And there are so many brilliant souls here
Yeah.
that have so many brilliant ideas. I just have faith in them, and I keep sending them love and energy that they can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think we need to support people. Yeah. I look forward to these nanobots. I can't help but wonder if they can help me with the laundry and the cleaning the floors. We've actually got a little
Mhm.
robot that cleans the floor, a little,
Yeah, the Roomba?
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
totally do.
Goes
And that's
around. The
it's one thing I
pets
love
love it.
about heaven, it's a clean. It's one thing I really remember
Yeah.
coming back and forth is that, it's always clean there. You don't have to clean anything up.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But I think the concept of us having to clean and having to maintain things is teaching us stuff for the bigger lesson. And when you're talking about climate crisis and the way that literally our world is, I think there's a connection there between housework and that, so that we can have an understanding that things degenerate and things need attention.
Mhm. Yes.
So yeah, really interesting. I love that. I love you've tapped on it. We've got another question coming through. Now, we touched on this briefly. It's around exit points. So, Marty would love to know a little bit more about exit points, and perhaps we can just come back. I'm just scrolling back to one of the very early comments. I wanted to wait for this one just to see what came in our conversation. But this was around your reaction to Ukraine. And so, from what I can
Mm.
understand, that there are a lot of souls who are subconsciously choosing to leave. So, would that be an exit point?
Yes. Yes. According to Michael Newton, who did a lot more work on this than I did, he saw that the people in like Nazi Germany, they actually had classes to prepare them because they knew what they were going into and what was going to happen. And they
Wow.
did so to bring an awareness that needed to happen on the planet. And it has helped us to grow. uh, Honestly,
Mm,
I would say that our having gone through that whole process, which was horrendous, has helped us to grow to a different place. And we continue to do that. And I'm hoping that there will be something like this from the Ukraine. My heart bleeds for the killing. I just do not like killing anything.
mm,
But it has this the cycle of the life on this planet. I mean, I keep trying to be vegetarian. I've been trying to do this since I was 12 because I hate killing things. My body
yeah,
won't do it. It really, it
yeah.
loses energy and it won't work.
We need to listen to that.
We
Yeah,
do.
I know.
But I just wish everything could just live forever and didn't have to die.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
understand it's the cycle and it's the two sides of the veil and nothing really dies. It just moves to the other side.
yeah.
More about exit
It's
points. Okay, exit points, we decide on when we're working with our group, we decide together what would be a good exit point for us and the different things that we want to accomplish within our group. So for myself, in my life, I would look at my mother. She took an exit point. That was a very beautiful, slow exit time. And she had a lot of time with her family and to say goodbye, and she took several days to do it. And so that's the way she wanted to do it. That's the way she planned it. And for me, I chose a really quick one because I don't want people having to make decisions
mm,
about my life. And I think I wanted something that I can be out really fast. If I'm going to go
yeah,
home, I'm going to go home. I don't want
I
to draw it
relate to that.
out. And
Yeah.
I really love mobility, so it'd be hard for me to do that. But we can plan several of them. Like I had planned a few, um, but some people only one. And sometimes people plan things that are rather unusual in their exit points. If we look at this young man that was macheted to death that I talked about a little bit earlier,
Mm,
he
mm,
chose an exit point that was kind of unusual and a way to do it that was kind of unusual. He actually told me and to tell his mother that he chose that time because he chose a violent death for something he was learning. I wish he would have elaborated on what he was learning. I'm still very curious about what he was learning.
mm,
So he did choose that. He had three different choices. He chose the one he chose because it took some people out of commission and put them behind bars that had killed other people, had killed him, and were going to kill more. So he chose
right.
those people, that particular path. So he had three different options and he chose that one, even though it was a very difficult death. Now, the other thing to know about death is that what he said is very important at one point. He said, I was not here. And he pointed to himself in the chair where he was being macheted. He pointed up. He said, I was here. I never felt a thing.
Mm, mm.
So he was already out of his body. And you see that happening a lot. I've talked to a couple of people that were in the 9/11 building when the towers, when they
Okay.
went down. And the one guy said that he was standing at his floor, he was getting into an elevator, and he was talking to the people, yelling at them, come and go with me. And he and the security guard were the only two that got in. But as he looked out over the floor of all these people, they weren't in their bodies. They had
Oh,
this blank
wow.
look on them. They had already
Yeah.
exited.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping the people in Ukraine did the same, and that many others get out before they have to go through
I
any experience.
Yeah, I expect so. I've literally, as you were saying that, just covered in goosebumps. They just got me there.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. But I hear of it a lot, especially with near-death experiences. People saying that they didn't feel a thing, they popped out of their body and
Mhm,
then they
mhm.
watched whatever happened take place.
Yes, I get that
And
a lot.
I've done a lot of reading, and a lot of researching, and it comes up again in people's theories and experiences, people talking with past loved ones, and they say, "But I popped out before it happened." It seems to be something that's actually quite common, that we don't necessarily
Yes,
feel that pain. So, but what a relief for the family
yes.
of that boy to know that he didn't
Oh,
feel, because that's
absolutely.
horrific, isn't it? I do
Yes.
think that's happening a lot with, yeah, people in wars, even with COVID happening at the moment, I think a lot of
Mhm,
people, when it gets more than we can actually go through, I think we will pop out and not have that full experience.
yes, and I think sometimes
Some may
people are
experience
in
it,
both
but
places, they're kinda coming and going to their body and
yeah,
and and kinda checking out and having a break and then coming back to the body and for some reason holding on.
exactly, and we see this a lot with people who are at end of life
Yes,
stages, perhaps
yes.
with a terminal illness. They come in and out of their body. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that coming up in future episodes, but
Oh,
wow, my mind is blown, Tonya. I just want to say a huge thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. So, thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Tonya, then pop along to her website, which is tonyaswan.com. The book again is Heaven and Earth, How It All Works. And it's a lovely read. It's not heavy, but it's very full of teaching. And I couldn't put it down. One point, my husband was saying, "Oh, should we watch a show?" And I was like, "Oh, just another page." And then he was like, "I've been waiting for you." And I'm like, I've just got to finish the chapter." It was absolutely engaging. It's so well written. So thank you for doing that, Tonya. I
thank
love
you
the
for
theme
reading it.
that Oh, no problem. I love the theme of books that keeps coming in. Yeah, it just keeps coming up for me again and again. So thank you so much. I have learnt so much from our discussion. I think we might need to get you back at some stage because we could have gone down rabbit holes in 20 of those topics, but trying to keep it
Absolutely.
back to the main thing. As a finishing point, what do you find the most fulfilling or the most positive part about doing your work? What's the part that you really just love?
Getting people out of pain.
Oh,
Seeing the
yeah.
light bulb go off when they see their brother, their mother, their sister, whoever it is.
Oh
Just
my
seeing
goodness.
them make that connection and being able to know that they're not really gone and to feel that for
Yeah.
themselves because a medium can tell you that and somewhat I have that ability, but it's not the same when you can do it for yourself and repeat it.
Yeah. No, that is
Just takes that pain away
amazing.
so much.
Amazing. We want less pain, don't we? There's so much pain in the world. I'm on a mission to reduce pain, to
Yay.
raise awareness, open conversations. So yeah, Tonya Swan, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you for your time. If you've loved this, just pop in a comment, say thank you. You might want to give a thumbs up or a love heart to Tonya. Thank you very much for you, the viewers who tune in and give us some of your questions, and for everything that happens behind the scenes. Thank you for you and your time. I hope that this has brought a whole lot of value to everybody listening. And if you're watching the replay, feel free to put in your questions and comments because we can come back and address those as well.
And thank
So,
you to you for doing this work. We're
oh,
so
I couldn't
grateful.
not. That's the thing. I feel very lucky to be doing this work. It's not always easy, but I feel very lucky and privileged. So yeah, thank you for that. That's lovely. So wherever you are in the world, have a fabulous sleep, have a fabulous day. Wish you well, and we look forward to another episode coming up very soon. Tonya Swan, thank you so much.
Thank you.